This episode is sponsored by Day by Day Book, a guided journal that helps you navigate the ups and downs of change while creating a life you love. For more information on the classic, recovery, or teen daybook, go to livedaybyday.com.
We move through life with all of our experiences, but our relationship to those experiences kind of changes as we grow, as we learn new things about ourselves, about the world around us, that kind of thing. So I feel now more than ever that there's so much possibility in my life. Whereas, right after the hysterectomy, I didn't feel this sense of possibility. And it took a few years to get familiar and sort of build that relationship with my grief. It's still there. Like, it hasn't gone away. The edges have softened. My capacity to be with it has increased. And so then my perspective, as my capacity increases, I've been able to just see that there is so much more out there. And that comes a lot from talking to other women too, other women who've been through something similar, and even just seeing what they're doing in their lives.
Welcome to Journeys Through Change, a podcast that inspires women to let go of the fear and say yes to possibility. I'm your host, Noelle Van, an author, creator, and empowerment coach who spent years in corporate America helping innovators and leaders ride the waves of change with ease and grace. I now work with women to step into change and unleash the power they have to create a life they love. Whether you're contemplating a change in your career, relationship, health, lifestyle, or anything in between, nothing's off the table. I'll be offering up simple insights to help you manage the ups and downs of change and sharing interviews with successful women who took a leap of faith to create the life they knew they were meant to live, sharing their wisdom, advice, and all the juicy lessons they learned along the way. So get cozy in your favorite comfy chair and let's get started. Sarah Jane Smith always wanted to become a mother. After multiple pregnancy losses, unexplained infertility, and a chronic illness that led to a hysterectomy, she was forced to face the heartbreak of a shattered dream with no guidance to pick up the pieces. On her path to healing, she used her experience as a seasoned yoga and meditation instructor to start creating relationship with her grief, making friends with her body, practicing self-compassion, and finding others who could relate to her experience as the catalyst for change that enabled her to move forward in her life. She is an embodiment teacher, coach, and grief tender who helps fellow childless, not by choice women integrate grief, amplify agency, and embody possibility so they can live a meaningful life even without the children they wanted. Sarah Jane, I am so happy you're here. Welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
So I thought we would get started just by talking a little bit about the challenges that you faced. So wherever you want to begin.
I had a hard time becoming pregnant in the beginning, and I managed to become pregnant a few times, but those ended in pregnancy loss. My whole sort of infertility journey was over about 8 years. And there's long periods in there of unexplained infertility, where I had, all the tests and going to see different doctors and different things like that. And they were just like the diagnosis of unexplained infertility sounds. They were like, well, we don't know. So keep on going, which, encouraging kind of, but not very hopeful. And alongside that, had a chronic illness, which resulted after about those sort of 8 years in me having a hysterectomy. And that, drew the line in the sand that I wasn't going to be able to have children. And that was in about 2018. So it's been 5 years since then.
Let me ask you this. So you had always wanted to be a mother. I'm imagining this was something that was a dream of yours or something that you had wanted to.
Yeah, I wasn't one of those little girls who was like, oh, I can't wait to grow up and be a mom. And, I wasn't like,
Right.
Didn't have a little baby dolly and that kind of thing. So it wasn't sort of like my life's crowning achievement, that I was looking for. But yeah, I wanted to have a family and, be part of a family unit,
Right.
for sure.
I totally get what you're saying. It's like, I think there are times, especially as we grow into adulthood, where when you're with the right person and it evolves into that. It's not like, oh, ever since I was 2, I had wanted to. So when you received this diagnosis, how did you feel? I know that there's probably a range of emotions that happen after an 8-year journey, but can you describe even just a few things that came to mind in terms of like, okay, what's next?
Yeah, well, getting the news that a hysterectomy was sort of the only way forward, after so long of trying, there was kind of mixed emotions of extreme grief, but also, and it took me a while to identify this, there was a bit of relief.
Ah,
For the 8 years of trying to keep up that hope and keep trying and trying all the things and feeling like it was my fault somehow, like I wasn't following the right diet or I wasn't tracking my cycle properly or just something that I wasn't doing right. And so with each month and each period and not being pregnant, I just felt like I was failing over and over and over and over again. And there's only so much of that someone can take.
right.
Thought lots about, well, maybe we should just stop trying along the
Mm.
way after the losses and just this sort of hopelessness. But then it was feelings of like, well, if we stop trying, kind of means maybe didn't want it that much. And then there was this sort of like sense of shame that went along with it, like kind of like giving up. And then this always little voice like, well, what if? What if? Because that's what all of the material, the infertility industry tells you, right? Keep going, keep trying. You'll get your miracle one day. There's like all these stories of everybody else who somehow got pregnant against all odds. So the next time it's going to be you, like this whole thing, which it was sort of I had unconsciously taken in those beliefs and was sort of like acting that out in my mind and in my life. So the idea of having the hysterectomy, it kind of took away the decision, which on one hand was terrible and grief filled, but also mixed in there was this some kind of relief. It wasn't my fault.
Right. Well, and I can only imagine like how stressful that is. That's a lot of years of holding hope, going to doctor's appointments. You know what I mean? I feel like even just having people being like, hang in there, it's going to happen type of thing, that can get exhausting.
Oh yeah, and like all the things that people say of like, oh well, you're just stressed. You just need to relax. You just need to go on a holiday, and it's like, you know what? No.
Yeah. So what did you do next? Like what was sort of the next steps after that? Well, I'm sure there was a little bit of just chilling out.
Yeah, I took the full time off work that they suggested after the hysterectomy. They're like, take 3 months off work. And I
Good
was
for you.
privileged enough to be able to do that. I didn't have to return to work. And so I thought, I've had a really rough go of it here. I'm just gonna take the time. And it happened to be summer in July. So
Nice.
where I live, July, August, September is beautiful. And so I spent the time at home on my sunny deck, like with people visiting. Like, I felt like that was like a gift to myself that I needed to have because there's been so many times, especially with the pregnancy losses where I didn't take the time. I was just like, okay, got to keep going to work, got to keep up with whatever else I'm doing in my life. It's not really encouraged to take the time to grieve and just sort of like have a nothingness. There's always this like next, next, next. And so I had done that previously and found that it wasn't good for me because there was a lot of feelings, there was a lot of stuff that just needed time and space, not to make any decisions to like, okay, now I'm going to do this big thing, just to be. How do I feel? What is going on? Like, just give things time to percolate.
I feel like that is such a brave way to look at your experience, because I know myself years ago. I mean, I can remember, I don't know, you're going through a bad breakup, or you're going through something where it's like, and you just want to plow through, right? It's like, I'm just going to stay busy. And it comes back in different ways. So the fact that you can sit and take pause and be okay with like, okay, these feelings are going to come up. This is going to be difficult. But to have that patience with yourself, I love that you took 3 months off. That should be something that's just a no-brainer for us. But it's so hard to do that, right? And to make that decision to say, I'm going to actually sit on my porch, which, by the way, just to let people know that you live in Salt Spring Island, which is the most fabulous place on earth.
True.
Talk about an idyllic place. But summertime, being able to just soak in the sun and be like, okay, I'm going to let this run its course until I'm ready. I think that's amazing, and not something that everybody chooses to do.
I had this feeling that I had to do it because I'd spent the previous 8 years plowing through, just as you said, like just keep going, don't take time. Like it's like too much. And this was like, it didn't feel like a choice. It was like, this is the only thing that I can do. And also because being a yoga and meditation practitioner and teacher, a big part of my personal practice is self-awareness, self-compassion. And in there is sort of practicing the skills and the ways to be comfortable with the uncomfortable and see what kind of arises, which might sound like, oh, that's so nice. Like it's not fun. It's like messy and lots of stuff arises, which isn't great. But you sort of, come back to your breath, come back to the thoughts of kindness and compassion and take it one step at a time.
I love that. I feel like you help people to sort of, I don't want to use the analogy build the muscle because it sounds like it's like, "Ugh," but like to build that endurance. Like you said, it's messy, but you are also then kind of practicing and being able to put that into play later on when things come up and get difficult. You can go back to your breath. I mean, I know yoga was a huge, huge thing for me in sobriety. So I see what you mean by that. You have been working in yoga. I mean, you've been a yoga instructor for many years now.
Yeah, I think 13.
Wow. Okay. 13 years. And you've been doing meditation
Yeah.
teaching, correct? You've been a meditation teacher. So for the same amount of time, a little bit.
Yes, for the same amount of time.
So do you incorporate one into the other at all? Or is it, okay.
Yeah.
I'm fascinated by what you do now and kind of how you have channeled all of this. So tell us a little bit about what you do in your yoga practice with women that have gone through something similar, and maybe how you got to that place first, because I sort of jumped ahead.
As I was working with my own internal feelings and my own thoughts about the hysterectomy, about not being able to have children, and this sort of like, well, what now? My yoga practice was always my safe place. My yoga mat was a place that's very familiar to me, to be there, to be with myself. And I have these skills of movement, of breath work, of noticing, self-compassion, meditation to help, as I said, be comfortable with the uncomfortable. The body works in many different ways. But I think the statistic is that we process like from the bottom up, like the experiences in our life, we take it in and react like 80% with the body, 20% with the mind. So to integrate any experience, we can't just sort of like think our way out of it or process our way out of it with only the mind. There has to be some kind of involvement with the body. And that's whether your childless journey included anything to do with infertility. You don't have to have just had that experience for your body to be involved, because your body is how you interact with the world, right? Through all of your senses. And so we're constantly reacting, taking things in with our body that we don't not necessarily conscious of. So then it makes sense that we need to include the body in integrating experience, whatever that experience is. So it became, through my own practice, became very clear that that wasn't really available. There's lots of folks doing great work out there with the childless community, but the body piece was kind of missing. So I thought that this was maybe somehow I could contribute in a way that maybe wasn't there already, by offering movement. So I'm a yoga teacher and I teach, regular yoga classes, like I have a studio, I teach like that. But when I talk about using movement and yoga with the childless not by choice population, it's not what you would think of, like going to a gym or a yoga studio. The focus is different. The focus is on noticing sensation in your body. So it's not prescriptive in the instruction per se. There's a lot of invitation. So just for instance, I might say something like, raise your arms to a height that works with your shoulders, which when you hear that kind of instruction, it kind of brings up more questions, right? Like, oh, okay, well, what is a height that works with my shoulders? And then you have to kind of try it out. So there's this sort of invitation to explore and an invitation to be curious and connecting with the sensations of your body so that you can then make choices that work for you. Because backing up and sort of being childless, it's not a choice. There's many things that happen along the way that make it not a choice. And not only, like in my case, is kind of an extreme, like cut and dry, like having a hysterectomy, so it's like, okay, there's no choice. But there's so many reasons why somebody could find themselves childless not by choice, and that sound like a choice, but aren't really. Like maybe you didn't meet somebody to have a child with. That's not a choice, really. Or maybe you didn't feel like you were mentally or emotionally in a place where you were ready to have a child until you passed your childbearing years. That's not really a choice either. Or maybe financially, it wasn't an option. You're not in a financial position, whether you're single or partnered, to add somebody else into the family unit, which is also not a choice, depending on so many different factors. So along the way, kind of no matter what your journey to being childless not by choice is, this sense of agency and choice is constantly eroded, where you feel like you don't have the power to make these big decisions in your life or to be able to follow through with things, which over time, it's very subtle, over time erodes your sense of agency or your power in the world in general, in your life in general, in your body, in yourself. And we can get very disconnected from the idea that because this big thing in our life didn't work out, not by our own doing, it's kind of like, well, we don't actually have the power or the choice or the right to make other things happen. So it dampens self-confidence in that way. So threading back to the yoga practice, these small instances of choosing, well, what's the height that works with my shoulders today? Build up the skills. You referred to the muscle, builds up the muscle of, oh, how do I feel? What do I want? And I can make a choice, and so it's the practice of that, building those layers slowly, 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 that amps up your sense of self-confidence, and the power to make decisions and choices.
I love that. I make that connection when you tell me, in terms of having that feeling of something that's happened out, that's an experience you've had, and then this becoming sort of the aftermath of it, having this feeling of less of a sense of control, do you find that, and in your own case, right, when you were coming out of this experience, or at least starting your journey of healing, did you feel, I know you mentioned disassociation, where that, it's almost like becoming friends with your body again, right? Because I can imagine if you're going through an experience where your body is quote unquote, not doing what you want it to do, or, that can become a relationship that you're building up with your body that's maybe not a healthy one.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah. And feeling like, yeah, my body wasn't doing what it's quote unquote designed to do. There was a fracture there. And so then working in a physical movement practice also allowed me to build trust with my body. Like, okay, I can stand up tall. It's going to hold me up. It sounds elementary, but it is powerful if you allow it to have that power. Most of us don't think about our body until it's not doing what we don't want to do. But majority of the time, we're able to do lots of things, like in varying levels. I understand that many people have many different experiences with what the body is able to do. And there's incredible adaptations and different ways that people are able to be in the world with differing abilities.
You've been working with other women that are childless, not by choice, for how many years now? A couple years?
3 years. It was during the pandemic where I had to close my yoga studio, my in-person classes. And it was just sort of like, this is the time. This is the time to go online. I've got the time and the space to develop this. And working online with this population, with the childless, not by choice population, is it's a blessing to be able to work online. Because you can imagine if you have all of these feelings, you've got grief, you've got shame, you've got, I don't know what I'm doing with my life, what's my self-worth. It's not like, oh yeah, I want to show up in person in a room and be like, yeah, this is what's happening in a group. So being able to join online, people sometimes don't even put their camera on, and that's fine. And to have that, like, you're in the safety of your own place and you can leave at any point. It cuts away a barrier. And also, there's often a lot of shame, and people don't necessarily want to, maybe people in the town that they live in, to know, even though, if you met another woman at, a childless not by choice class, they also would be childless not by choice. But there is this real sense of wanting to be anonymous at first because the feelings are so big. So working online and being able to connect with people all over the world, you're not necessarily going to see them in the grocery store, is actually takes away a barrier to entry.
Well, it just makes a lot of sense because when you think about, this kind of leads to my next question. When you think about going through that experience, which is a very, very individual, personal experience, right? Everybody is experiencing it differently and for different reasons. Do you find, if you are ever in a conversation with someone, or if there is ever a time that something like that comes up, and I only say this out of kind of building up that sensitivity as someone who might be on the other side of that kind of conversation or in a group or whatever, have you ever had experiences where people that are well-intentioned, they ask questions that maybe can be awkward or uncomfortable or feel like you're sort of being asked to put something very personal out there?
Oh, sure, absolutely. Usually, when you get together in groups as women, like whatever it is, my most recent experience is I joined a community choir. I didn't know very many people, and it's all women. And I was like, let's see how many minutes I'm in the room before somebody asks me if I have kids,
Yes, yeah, yeah.
And so that is such a common question. And at this point, I'm comfortable with my answer. But there's been so many times in the past where the grief was like right at the surface, the panic about, no, I don't have kids. I want them, but I can't have them. That was right at the surface, that I would not go to certain social events that I might go to, or I wouldn't want to go to this thing in case somebody asks me, and just, yeah, it's very personal when the answer is no.
Right.
Because most people, then if you say no, they don't say, oh, okay, and change the subject.
Mm-hmm.
There's often like, well, why? Which is incredibly bold if you think about it,
Right. Yes.
Or some flippant comment, like if you say, well, no, I wanted to, but it didn't happen for me. People say things like, oh, well, kids are more trouble than they're worth, or you can have mine.
Right. Just the awkward, like trying to make it okay. It's like telling somebody you're
Yeah.
sober. Same thing. People kind of don't, they don't really know what to do with the information sometimes.
Yeah. So one of the things that we do early on when I work with women is we do this writing exercise where we recall all these times we were asked all these awkward questions that like threw us into, sometimes early on in grief, you have to leave the room and you end up crying in the bathroom, and then you have to come back. So, just gently touching into those things, not diving deep to like uncover these traumatic events, but just lightly remembering and then writing them all down. And then like, what do you wish you'd said?
Ooh, that's so good.
Like in a nasty way, in a super positive way, and then in a middle ground way, just to get it out,
Right.
because we, all have these fantasies later of like, oh, I wish I'd said such and such. And even if it's not really something we would actually say, because we would feel bad after because it was like rude or mean or whatever.
Right, yeah.
But just to get it out. And then from all of those things, crafting, okay, this is in like an ideal world. This is what I would say. And then practice saying it out loud. So it's like a little bit of a script so that then the next time somebody asks you, you're not caught off guard. You have something to say that you're confident in saying. You feel good about it. You've practiced it out loud. So it like kind of like rolls off the tongue. You're not like, makes you feel even worse. And in my, no, I don't have kids. I always put on the end, like, I'd rather not talk about it. What else would you like to talk about?
An invitation to move on to the next subject.
Let's do something else.
Yeah. When you think about being in a conversation, any kind of scenario, right? You're at a party, you're at a whatever, dinner party, you're sitting next to someone. That's helping the other person out too, right? Because
Totally.
you're redirecting without them having to be like, oh, so anyways, about the weather,
Yeah, exactly.
It's almost like helping women to become more comfortable with the situation as they move through. Because I know, and we had talked a little bit about this before, it's a journey. It's not like, okay, well, in 2 days, everything's going to be totally fine. It's a journey. And in any situation in life, it's a constant learning, I'm sure, and a constant moving forward. When you look at your perspective now, has your perspective, not on the situation itself, but has your perspective just on your life and kind of where you are now and what you're doing now, has that shifted in any way, maybe if from 2 years ago, even when you started working? Because it sounds like you opened yourself up to working with other women because you knew that obviously community is helpful for you to heal as well, but that you were able to serve. I mean, you have that experience that you can help women with a great deal. So do you feel like there's been any notable perspective shifts in that process?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. We don't just have an experience, whatever it is, and then, over time that experience stays over there and then we end up over here, right? We
Right.
move through life with all of our experiences, but our relationship to those experiences kind of changes as we grow, as we learn new things about ourselves, about the world around us, that kind of thing. So I feel now more than ever that there's so much possibility in my life. Whereas, right after the hysterectomy, I didn't feel this sense of possibility. Like I was just sort of like in the depths of grief and sort of like in the fog of that. And it took a few years to get familiar and sort of build that relationship with my grief. It's still there. Like it hasn't gone away. The edges have softened. My capacity to be with it has increased. And so then my perspective as my capacity increases, I've been able to just see that there is so much more out there. And that comes a lot from talking to other women too, other women who've been through something similar, and even just seeing what they're doing in their lives. And it's not like we all have to then, do this big plan B, like start a nonprofit or
Right,
do like
right.
some giant thing to make up for the fact that we didn't have kids. Sort of it's like whatever you want to do, you can do it. It's an opening process to what's possible, to
Right.
opening the doors a little bit wider, 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 as your capacity to be with your grief, be comfortable with the uncomfortable. And as you build your self confidence as a childless woman in the world, that
Mhm.
you do have worth. There is room for you. And what's possible now that might not have been possible if you'd had children. And it's not sort of, well, one's better than the other. It's really a sense of this is the situation.
Mhm.
So what am I going to do now?
In all of our lives, right? The things of the past are what get us to where we are today, whether
Mm-hmm.
they're good, bad, or otherwise. And I think what you speak to is that confidence that is built. I always think of it as like when something that is so raw happens, right? And it's like right at the surface, how you were describing it earlier, right at the surface, right? It's a very emotionally charged topic. And as time goes on and you move through the grief and you go through the process, it doesn't make it any less impactful,
Mm-hmm.
but you can look at it from a perspective that is more, I don't want to say grounded, but it's a little bit more, you're able to take pause and you're able to look at it from a distance enough to have the perspective on it. And what you're saying is this perspective is like possibility. There are things out there that now you can think of as next steps, next phases, next chapters in your life that maybe you would not have had. It doesn't discount it in any way. It just becomes what it is. And I think there's something about as we get older, I hate to say that, but I really believe that because I don't think it's a bad thing. I
Mm-hmm.
feel like getting older is so profoundly interesting to me because I don't know, we're just stronger. There's a sense of strength in everything that we reflect upon that we probably didn't have maybe in our early 30s, right? Where everything was just sort of happening. And now it's like, wow, we have the grace to kind of absorb and learn and teach and serve and all of those things.
Yeah, I'm with you. Getting older is a privilege. Not everybody has the
Oh,
opportunity.
yes, yes, that is a great way to put it. That's very true. So you are continuing to work with women. What's coming next for you? Is there anything on the horizon that you are offering to women that are interested in going down this path with you for a time?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I always have a free self-compassion, self-guided course that folks can sign up for and do at any time. But in the next few weeks, I'm going to start the launch for a live cohort for a 3-month group program. And it's sort of a mix of all these things that we've been talking about. So, working with your grief, working with your body in the sense of movement and noticing, naming feelings and sensation, journaling, group work, reflection, sharing, and being in the 3-month cohorts, like really making those connections with other women. And especially, we're coming up to a holiday time, which can be a very challenging and often lonely time for childless people. So to be able to have this strong container, this strong connection with other women who are going through the same thing is a really nice support.
Oh, I love that. I think I didn't even think about that. You're right. The holidays definitely have I'm sure, a bit of a different element to
Mhm.
them.
Mhm.
First of all, I want to thank you, Sarah Jane, because you're shedding a light on something that people don't often talk about, right? And I know you help so many women because you're open and so you have the experience behind you. Plus, I just think the work that you do is so important. I really do. I feel like you offer so much to women in need. And I just thank you for being open about your journey with
Yeah,
us.
well, thanks for being interested enough to talk to me about it.
Of course. And we're going to have all of Sarah Jane's links in the notes, in the show notes, so people can take a look at those if they want to reach out. And thank you again. Once again, it's been a pleasure.
You're so welcome. Thank you.
That's it for now. Until next time. Thanks for listening to the Journeys Through Change podcast. You can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or really wherever you get your podcasts. And be sure to follow us and leave a review if you've enjoyed this episode. And share it with a friend or on social media to spread the good word, so more women like you can find us and join in on the fun. For more information on the podcast or Day by Day book, go to livedaybyday.com.